In this slide, we're going to evaluate the connection between advertising and sales. The argument is the more you advertise, the more you ought to sell. Whether that's true or not is a good question. Whether it's worth it or not is a good question. But let's go ahead and start evaluating it using a scatter plot, a trend line, and some regression analysis. So to do so, let's go ahead and start a new chat. Just clicking here works fine. And let's now also upload the data. And so here's the data we're going to use. And we'll go ahead and hit enter. And it looks like it has advertising expenses and revenues by month. I believe there are 48 months included there. And 36 months. Okay, so that's included there. So what I'm asking it to do now is provide the last 5 lines of data, and I maybe don't need to do that because I think it's already here and it looks okay, but sometimes that's a technique used to evaluate the completeness of the data. The next thing I want to do is just show a scatter plot. I just have 2 variables here, advertising and revenues, and I'm going to go ahead and specify which is the X and the Y variable. Generally, Y revenues I would consider to be the dependent variable, and advertising expenditures I would consider to be the independent variable. And so I'm going to ask it to perform or create a scatter plot. Here it's giving me 2 choices. It won't always do that. Sometimes it does. But this is how it learns, which, given my prompt, what it will actually do. And I guess my only problem sometimes is it takes longer to do both responses, but it's also good to see how they might be different and how they think differently. And so here looks like 2 different possibilities. So far to me it looks identical, so I'm not really seeing the difference there. But it is, so asked which one I prefer, and I didn't know that I could easily see. This one has $ signs in it. This one does not, so I would guess I would go ahead and prefer that approach. Okay, so with that, I see a relationship there. In general, it looks to be positive. The axes aren't perfect, and usually I'd like to start at 0, but then we'd probably have a big bunch up here. So next I wanted to insert a trend line. And in terms of trend line is kind of like a regression, especially if it's just univariate between one independent and one dependent variable. And then I'm going to ask it to provide a regression equation. In other words, what is the slope of that trend line, and how could I then put in an amount of advertising expenses and get an output for revenues? What does the algebraic equation look like, which we're going to estimate using regression? So I'm asking it to provide a trend line and also a regression equation with related statistics, because what I want to do is I want to be able to insert an amount of expenditures and see if I could tie it to what I expect the revenues would be. So it's performing a regression. We're not going to use kind of regression to the nth detail here as we could. But you can kind of see, hopefully it will give us a trend line, but we can also see the regression equation that if you multiply $3.5 times each dollar of advertising expense, so in other words, the multiplier is 3.5. And so each dollar of advertising expense turns into revenue with a y-intercept of about 825, and I believe this is all in $1 million. The adjusted R-square is okay. The model is significant, and it looks like we'd be able to use that. So it suggests a positive but relatively weak relationship. Weak because this R-square or adjusted R-square is quite low. I could ask it to go ahead and regenerate this trend line, and maybe I'll go ahead and do that. This is kind of make it up as we go type of a thing, where if it doesn't do what you ask, and sometimes if you give it too long of instruction, like I gave it 2 instructions there, and it kind of skipped one of the 2, and so I know it can produce a trend line and would be able to do that for you, but it looks like it's not as willing to do that at the moment. So you can see offline I finally got it to perform and insert the trend line, and you'll see the same regression equation as we just had. Now I'm going to ask it, if advertising expenses are $50,000, what would we expect sales to be? And it's just going to go back and put it back into the same equation here, multiplying 3.5 times 50,000 plus this 825,195, and gives us an answer of virtually $1 million. And so now I'm going to go ahead and output that scatter plot with the trend line as we try to tell this story. And I put that into a PNG file, and then also asking it to provide the results. So anytime, so you can see that here, download the scatter plot, it shows up here, that's something we could download. And then finally we could just say, please output the prompts, whether it be to the screen or to a Microsoft Word file. But here it's kind of going one by one. So that completes this lab.